Hey, Balan Wonderworld's finally out. I wonder what the reviews are like. Oh. Oh dear. Oh no. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Ooh. Let me take you back to a simpler time. 2020. Okay, maybe simple was a poor choice of words, but if you were to ask me back then about the game that I was most excited to play in 2021, I could, hand on heart, say that it was Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, closely followed by Balan Wonderworld. Back when the original trailer dropped for this game last year, I was unbelievably excited. Finally, a new mainstream 3D platformer that wasn't from a huge brand or a revival of an old icon. And it's done by Yuji Naka and Naoto Ohshima, the forefathers of Sonic the Hedgehog. Sign me the hell up. But then the demo came out and all my excitement dropped through the floor down to the fiery pits of hell itself. If you want my thoughts on the demo, I have a whole video complaining about it. No, seriously, I complain about an hour-long demo for half an hour. Regardless, Square Enix decided to ignore the plea of literally every person who wanted to see this game succeed and released it as scheduled on March the 26th. And I shit you not, every single criticism that I made of the demo can 100% be applied to the final game. Every single thing that I said was wrong with the demo is still here. They didn't change a damn thing. Oh wait, my mistake, they implemented the day one patch that makes you move slightly faster. Good. Look, I'm glad they at least fixed something, and I know that major changes couldn't have been made in the time frame, but you could have maybe done a bit more. Controlling your character feels a tiny bit better, but no more than that. I will say, however, that before I dive into the seizure-inducing game, and yes, I mean seizure-inducing, I still love the music in this game and the themes that they're tackling, like depression and sadness. I still think that those are good themes to tackle in a kid's game, because there are kids who play this game that can find those themes relatable. The unfortunate thing is that they don't go far enough with exploring those themes, so it just almost seems pointless in the game. But we'll come back to that in just a second. I also still quite like the overall design and art style of the game, and I think that with the setting that they have, they could have been just a little more creative, but the game is colourful, to its credit. The story is alright, although apparently there's a bunch of plot holes thanks to the tie-in novel that came out, but let's take a deeper look at that story, as deep a look as you can take with this. So in this story, you play as either Leo Craig or Emma Cole. Christ, could these names be any more generic? These names have about as much inventiveness as text-to-speech Dan. Anyways, generic white name 1 gets depressed because people like his dancing. Okay. And generic white name 2 is depressed because people in her house are keeping secrets from her. I suppose that's a better reason for her feeling sad and anxious. Anyways, they come across the Balan Theatre, where they find Balan, who does this. Jesus Christ, man, she's 15. Well, after that display, Balan casually kidnaps generic white names 1 and 2 and throws them into the Wonderworld with zero warning or consent. Are we sure Balan isn't the bad guy here? To be serious for a second, I do like how they portrayed Balan in the cutscene here, for the most part. They show off his charisma, his charm, his Looney Tunes style wackiness, but at the same time leaving some mystique about him. You want to know more about him, but unfortunately that's how it is for the whole game. Balan is barely in this game, but I'll save that criticism for later. Anyways, the Balan Theatre is where people go when their heart loses its balance, which is a fancy way of saying that they feel sad. There are 12 different worlds that you travel through, each one representing one person who is also at an imbalance within themselves. You travel through the worlds, beat the bosses, which are supposed to represent the darkness within the people, and finally take down Lance, who is the complete opposite of Balan. Hang on a minute. Oh, clever, Yuji Naka. Finally, all the characters you saved must return back home, but not before Balan reveals his true form, and oh boy, you can practically hear DeviantArt going crazy with this. What the fuck? So generic Whitename 1 returns home to have friends, and generic Whitename 2 finds out that the reason people were talking behind her back is because they were planning her surprise birthday party. If you can't figure out why that's dumb, that's on you. There is one thing I don't get here. So this theater is where you go when you're depressed, and Balan takes you to the Wonderworld. But he doesn't do anything. I'm serious. Generic Whitenames 1 and 2 did all the work and saved all these people, and Balan didn't do jack. He literally put all these guys into the Wonderworld and left them there to fend for themselves. Is it too late to go back to that theory that he's actually the bad guy? Look, overall the story is okay at best. It's pretty harmless overall, and again, like I said, I do like the themes that they're trying to push across here and the message that they're trying to pass to children. I just have one main issue with it, and that's how little the story is actually presented in the game. You would have to do your own research on the story outside of the game just to get the full picture here. I'm serious. Surely it couldn't have been that difficult to have more of the story in the game. Did they purposely leave out major parts of the story just to promote that tie-in novel? That is not okay. At least have a flowing and consistent narrative in the game that can entertain the audience and help drive them through the game, because God help me if the gameplay will, and then have all the tiny details and extra information be in the novel. Whatever, I'm done with the story. Let's just move on to the actual gameplay itself. Like I said, there are 12 worlds for you to explore, each with 2 acts and a boss battle. One of the first issues that I noted in my previous video about this game is how the game looks and its overall graphical fidelity. And yes, it did not change one bit. It still looks like a launch title for the PlayStation 3, back when the PlayStation 3 just meant the PlayStation 2, but shiny. Graphics, especially a platformer, aren't my main concern though. I just felt the need to mention it because this is a full price game that looks like an indie game. But another early issue that I stated was the controls, that being how slow you were and how unnatural your overall movement and jumping felt. Like I already mentioned, they released a day 1 patch which was supposed to fix the controls, but in all honesty, it didn't do much. It pretty much just made your character move a little faster, which is cool, but that honestly wasn't enough for me. The biggest issue though, hands down, is still the implementation of the costumes. The costumes just suck. There's no other way of putting it. They are so underwhelming and just not fun to use. In every single trailer, every single article, every single interview, all you hear is Square Enix advertising the fact that there are over 80 different costumes in the game, as if they're proud of that. That statement didn't make people go, wow, that's awesome. It just made people concerned with how they could possibly have cohesive level design while still having over 80 different abilities. This is a clear example of quantity over quality. Whilst there are over 80 different costumes, there is 100% certainly not over 80 different abilities. There are so many repeat power-ups that are disguised as new costumes that it's ridiculous. For example, early in the game you get the pounding pig costume, which allows you to ground pound. Cool, but later in the game you come across 2 more power-ups that do the exact same thing. It only allows you to ground pound. What, you want another example? Okay, look at the sheep costume. It allows you to float forwards very slowly. Fine. But later you get the flower costume that allows you to also float forwards in the same manner. Shit like this is just filler. It didn't need to be here, but the game needed a selling point, so they had to stretch it to over 80 costumes. Literally, by having the selling point of over 80 costumes, the developers shot themselves in the foot before they began, because implementing that amount of power-ups in an understandable fashion is an extremely difficult task, and a task that you can clearly tell the developers didn't put enough thought and care into. Even Yuji Naka didn't think that his team could reach 80 costumes, and was very surprised when they did. There's also the issue of power-ups feeling completely useless. The example that I gave in my last video was the wolf costume and the dragon costume, and how they essentially do the exact same thing, which is to destroy blocks and defeat enemies. The wolf costume does this by adding a Tasmanian devil spin to your jump, whilst the dragon costume does this by having you shoot a fireball a grand total of 3 feet in front of you. Alright. But the dragon costume handicaps you by taking away your ability to jump, because some dick in the development team decided to have every button on the controller do the same damn thing. I'm not kidding. Every button jumps aside from your left control stick, which allows you to move, and your right control stick, which allows you to move the camera. The X button, circle button, square button, triangle button, R2 button, all the buttons do the same thing. It's stupid, and it severely limits the creativity and usefulness of the power-ups, again, just so that they could have that selling point of having over 80 costumes. Because of this ingenious idea, each costume can only have one singular function that replaces that jump ability. So it's not as though the costume you get gives you an ability on top of the jump that you already have, it replaces your base jump. So if this costume doesn't allow you to jump, like a couple that we're going to come across very soon, then it's completely pointless. Hell, if all three of your costumes don't allow you to jump, you are screwed and you have to kill yourself, purposely take damage, or find a new costume to get rid of the one that you're currently wearing. Again, they handicap themselves with this limitation. Even in one of the levels, you get this fire hydrant power-up which essentially flobs some water in front of you, which is used to create platforms on lava. But then in the same level, you get a costume that lets you walk on fire anyways. So, what the hell was the point of that fire hydrant power-up? There's even costumes that activate randomly without your input. This is a horrible idea, especially in a platformer, because you don't want control taken away from the player. The player in a platformer should always have control because of the precise movements that are needed. I already talked about the infamous Box Fox and how it's just one of the most useless power-ups in gaming existence that 99% of the time leads to your own death because you have no control over when you transform into that box, and that box carries your momentum, so you better not activate it on a decline or you are going right off the edge. But there's also this chest power-up that you find that auto-fires, but only when you're standing still. On top of that, the direction of fire is constantly rotating, so you can't aim where you're shooting. The only reason that these power-ups activate like this is so that you can still jump, because of that dumbass one-button rule. I cannot stress the point enough that the developers limited their design and creativity purely for a selling point. What, did you originally make this game with the Atari 2600 controller as your inspiration? Look, the overall problem here is that the costumes just aren't fun to use. They're either mundane, useless, frustrating, or so incredibly situational that you can tell the developers struggled to reach 80 costumes. For example, there's this bulldozer power-up that purely allows you to move these specific bulldozer blocks, and that's it. Okay, I guess that's not the worst idea, but those specific blocks only appear in a few levels, and not in every level. Imagine how cool it would have been if that allowed you to move literal pieces of the terrain so that you could create your own platforms to then complete specific platforming challenges. That would be interesting and fun, which is against the design ethos of this game apparently. When the main focus and selling point of your game is not fun, then you have failed. It's not even like Sonic or Mario where your base character is fun to control with a diverse moveset. The costumes here are essential to beating the game. Your character without any costumes is one of the most worthless things imaginable. All you can do is run and jump, and it's not even fun to do just that. You can't even defeat any enemies without wearing a costume. It's not like power-ups in games like Mario and Sonic where they're optional. They are needed here, otherwise you're not going anywhere. So what does that mean? It just means that you have to use these boring, uninventive power-ups throughout the whole game, which just gets tedious after a while. I can't tell you whilst playing this game the amount of times I just wanted to stop playing because these power-ups were just so boring. Outside of seeing the new areas that you go to, the thing that you should be looking forward to when you're going to each stage is the new costumes you're gonna get. But I never looked forward to any of the new costumes we were gonna get because I always knew they weren't going to be good. I already stated that a better way to have implemented the costumes was to drastically reduce the amount of them and give the remaining ones more functions. Or, if you really wanted this many power-ups, give the player the ability to mix and match different costumes, and have the ability of those individual costumes usable via the triangle, circle, and square buttons, while still having X let you jump. That would have been interesting. Imagine if you had the head of the dragon costume, the body of the bat costume, and the legs of the wolf costume. That means that, say for example, with the circle button, you could fire fireballs thanks to the dragon power-up. With the triangle button, you can do the homing attack thanks to the bat costume. And with the square button, you can jump with that Tasmanian devil spin thanks to the wolf costume, while still having your base jump on the X button. So that means that you can still have 3 power-ups that don't have any capabilities of jumping because you can always jump thanks to the X button. That would have been more interesting and given the player more agency in them deciding on how to solve specific puzzles. But no, you don't get to do that in this game. That would require too much fun, and like I said, this game doesn't want you to have fun. Seriously, just this one button format kills any enjoyment that you could have possibly had with the costumes. Hell, to add to this big shit pile, there's an animation for whenever you switch costumes. And guess what? Because each costume only has that one function, that means that you are always switching between them. This gets really annoying and pace-breaking, because with the nature of this game, you constantly have to switch costumes. It's stupid. You want to know what else is stupid? The keys. In order to get a costume in the level, you need a key. This could have also been something that was interesting. You'll hear me use that word a lot. Have the level designed in a way where you would need to hunt down for the keys to unlock costumes so you can progress further. But here, the keys are absolutely pointless. Why? Because they are always, without fail, a few feet away from the costume or sometimes right next to it. What was the point of that? It's a time waster and nothing more. It literally exists just so that they have another collectible in their 3D platformer. There is, however, 2 costumes that are good. Well, good isn't the right word, broken is more like it. One of them is really broken, and the second one is unbelievably busted. And the first costume is the Frost Fairy, which essentially lets you create ice stepping stones in mid-air, which actually breaks the game. With this costume, you can reach places that you aren't supposed to get to quite yet. I'm sure you've all seen the infamous Donkey video where he uses this to reach a platform much higher than he could actually reach at the time. There are other power-ups similar to this, like the bubble power-up for example, but it's nowhere near as effective. This one power-up makes collecting Balan trophies a breeze. That second power-up that I mentioned, well, we'll come back to that later. Okay, to quickly cover this, in each act there are several Balan trophies that can be collected. They are earned in various ways, such as finding them in the level, beating Balan Bao QuickTime events, beating those weird sports minigames that appear randomly every now and then. What? And by beating bosses. These trophies are required to unlock preceding levels in the game. So yes, you will find yourself revisiting old stages to collect any missed trophies. Think of them like the Power Stars from Super Mario 64 or the Sun and Moon medals from Sonic Unleashed. The level design isn't any good either. It's bland, boring, and uninventive. Hey, it's the tagline for this game. This is supposed to be a puzzle platformer, and I'm still sitting here wondering where the hell the puzzle was and where the platforming is. It's boring. It sucks because you can't have any creative or cohesive level design because of how many different power-ups there are and how poorly they were implemented. Also, the levels just look weird. You will see all kinds of crazy shit in the levels, ranging from giant characters that disappear, to random dancers that disappear, to my will to live that's slowly disappearing. No, I'm serious, I don't know if I can keep going with this. Some of these levels are designed like an acid trip. There are some cases where it looks okay, but other times where it looks just weird. Not bad, but weird. With the whole theatre setting and the fact that you're in another world, they could have gotten really creative here, but I don't know, man, it's just pretty crazy. Which, again, isn't bad, it's just confusing. And to top it all off, the animation is abysmal. I mean, Christ on a bike, with a guy named Mike holding a pike. This is some ugly animation. It looks motion captured. Not The Last of Us motion captured, but Dex Dogtective motion captured. What, did the developers decide to use a Kinect for their motion capture? But what about the hub world? The Isle of Tims? Well, it just serves as a way for you to get into the levels and to feed your Tims. and also to build this random tower in the middle that doesn't do shit. Okay. You see, the Tims are those furry testicles that have been following you around throughout the entire game. In each stage, you collect these crystal drops of varying colours, and depending on what colour you feed your Tims, that will change their colour and by proxy, their corresponding abilities. For example, pink ones will pick up items and red ones will attack enemies. But these bonuses are so minor that you forget about them immediately. I could not be asked to feed my Tims any of these drops because I felt like I was just wasting my time because I didn't see the advantages to it. This essentially made one of the main collectibles of the game worthless. There is, however, one very special collectible which is rainbow coloured. You bring all the crystals sponsored by Skittles to this statue and you unlock the most broken power-up yet. The Balan costume. Remember that costume that I mentioned earlier? Essentially, you get to fly with no limits. There's just no game anymore. I guess by the end of this, the developers just realized how bad the game is and so added this auto-win power-up just to save you time. Hey, I'm not complaining. If the developers don't give a shit, I certainly don't. And Balan, the main guy, the character on your front cover, the character that the game is named after, is barely in the game. Past the opening and finale, Balan either just makes his cameo appearances in cutscenes or is relegated to these simple as shit QuickTime events. And I mean simple as shit. You press one button to win these. Hey, I think I'm starting to see a pattern here. It's either press it when the outlines match, or mash it. But the thing that I'm most pissed about is look at all the cool shit Balan is doing. I want to do that. Balan should have been the main character that we play as, so that we can directly control him and do all this cool shit. But no, we have to play as generic white names 1 and 2, and you can clearly see that they reuse the animation for each one of these segments. And these segments are everywhere. Sometimes there are multiple per level. But the annoying thing is, if you somehow mess it up, you have to exit the level and then come back just to have a crack at it again. So, good luck to anybody trying to get 100% in this game while staying sane. Oh, and the Switch version still sucks. If you thought that this game on the PC, PS5, or PlayStation 4 looked bad, then Jesus Christ, you are in for a shock. I said earlier that this looks like a very early PlayStation 3 game. Well, the Switch version looks like a PlayStation 2 game. The colors look ugly, textures are missing, and the game looks darker and just not as pleasant to look at. But the cherry on top is that the frame rate is just about as consistent as that constipated shit I took a few weeks ago. It runs so poorly, and you can tell that this was just a hasty port for a quick cash grab. The funny thing is, there are much more graphically intensive and mechanically demanding games that run just fine on the Switch. So what the hell happened here? If for whatever reason you want to play this game, do not get the Switch version. I cannot stress that point enough. I don't care if the only console you've got is a Switch, just don't buy this game, it's not worth it. The bosses are still piss easy, almost no challenge at all, which, to be honest, I kind of expected, but the boss battles actually do something interesting, which I kind of like the idea of. You see, after beating a boss, you're rewarded with up to 3 Balan statues. In each boss arena, minus one of them, there are 3 costumes that can be used in different ways to hurt the boss, and the bosses require 3 hits to be taken down. You see where I'm going with this. For each unique hit you deal to the boss with a different costume, you get a Balan trophy. I like this. It encourages variety in the gameplay and gives credence to the other costumes in the arena, giving you different options when dealing with these battles. So yeah, 1 point goes to Balan Wonderworld. That brings your total to minus 93. There are, however, also issues with the co-op of the game. If you watched my last video, you will know that I was highly optimistic about the co-op. I thought that that is where you were gonna have some actual well-designed puzzles that take advantage of multiple costumes at the same time. But no. You see, co-op is actually a more torturous way of playing this game. If you for some reason decide that you don't like your friends anymore, you get them to play this with you, with each of you taking control of either generic white name 1 and generic white name 2. The problem is that player 2 is hindered, so much so that it actually affects player 1. You You see, one major aspect of the game is taking costumes from one level and bringing them to the next. But how do you do that? Well, you see, when you finish a level, whatever costumes you finished with are stored in your wardrobe, so that you can access them in other levels. Cool. But Player 2 does not get this luxury, meaning that every time you start a new level, Player 2 has nothing. This just makes it feel like co-op was an afterthought instead of a core function of the game, and with the way this game is set out, I think that co-op could have been great and the genuine highlight. They could have designed interesting platforming challenges and puzzles around the co-op gameplay that allows you to take advantage of each other and the costumes that you have, but this game didn't do that. But give that point back. But after beating the game, you unlock a third act of each stage, because that's what I wanted, more of this. I will be honest though, in some of these third acts, the level design is at its best. It's not particularly amazing, but I actually had to use my brain a few times. Why didn't the rest of the game have level design like this? It sucks that you have to trudge through the main game first in order to get here, but at least it's not absolutely horrible. Don't worry though, there are still those couple of levels that absolutely suck. Just to remind you that you are in fact still playing Balan Wonderworld. It is clear that this game has failed both critically and commercially. In fact, in Japan, it sold less than 2,100 copies in its opening week. That is absolutely horrible. It promised so much, but executed it so poorly that it's beyond saving. I don't even see one of these games that is so bad now, but eventually becomes a cult classic. It's just bland. I was so bored playing this that I had to have something on in the background just to occupy me. It's not fun, but it's not extremely frustrating. It is just that boring. You are guaranteed to lose your will to live as you play this. I cannot even recommend this as a children's game because there are way better games that a child could be playing. And the fact that Square Enix had the balls to charge £50 for this glorified indie game just cements the tombstone in its place. Literally 1 week after this game came out, I was seeing it being sold at nearly half price. And that isn't just second-hand copies sold by random people, I'm talking new and sealed copies by big retailers. So overall, I can't give this game any more than a 4 out of 10. And that might be a little bit generous. I wanted so badly for this game to succeed, but it didn't. Everything went wrong when the developers decided to sacrifice fun for a selling point. In a platformer, the focus should be on the gameplay, no matter how good or elaborate your story may be. Hell, like I said, if you've got a good story, you might as well just make a movie. But the gameplay here is so dull. The costumes aren't fun to use, and in some cases end up taking control away from the player, which should not happen in a platformer. The level design is bad in most cases, and boss battles are way too easy. And that actually just goes for the whole game actually. The game is just way too simple. As well as this, the main guy, Balan, is severely underutilized and should have had a bigger focus and played a bigger role. Like I said, I would have preferred a game where we controlled Balan, because that looks like it would be fun as hell. But we don't get the privilege of that. This isn't the worst 3D platformer I've ever played, that honor still goes to Bubsy 3D, but it certainly isn't the best. Right now, the future of the Balan company is uncertain, and with the fact that Naka himself stated that if this game does well, it could turn into a franchise, I don't think we'll be seeing this turn into a franchise anytime soon. All I can do now is wish Naka and the rest of the guys at the Balan company the best, and hope that if we ever do get a game from them ever again, it will truly be everything that this game is not. Well, thank you all for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you saw and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe, and if you like this video, leave a like. It's pretty self-explanatory. Share the video, turn notifications on, etc, everything every big YouTuber ever says, and with all that said, I'll see you guys next time.